Less than a third of the ancient cities mentioned in historical records have been physically located. The rest exist only in texts, in oral tradition, or in the accounts of travelers who visited them before they vanished from the surface of the earth. These are 10 lost cities that archaeology, satellite imaging, and sheer accident have pulled back into the light. Among them are a Bronze Age capital that disappeared so completely its location was debated for decades, a Roman city sealed under volcanic ash so thoroughly it preserved bread still sitting in the ovens, and a medieval metropolis larger than any European city of its era, hidden under the jungle until a helicopter flew a laser grid over it. For most of the 19th century, scholarly consensus held that Homer's Troy was a literary invention and the Trojan War a story with no historical foundation. Heinrich Schliemann disagreed. He traveled to a mound called Helike on the northwestern coast of modern Turkey in 1868, and he excavated with more enthusiasm than precision. He blasted through upper layers that turned out to be later settlements to reach what he announced as Priam's treasure. He smuggled gold jewelry and weaponry out of Turkey before anyone could stop him. The treasure predated Homer's Troy by roughly 1,000 years, meaning Schliemann had destroyed the very layer he was looking for in his rush to reach it. Later excavations identified at least 9 distinct cities built on top of one another at Helike. The layer designated Troy Savina, dating to around 1180 BC, showed evidence of fire, destruction, and violent conflict, placing it squarely within the period the Iliad describes. Write in the comments where you are watching from. Curious to see how far this reaches. Petra never disappeared from the memory of the Bedouin communities living around it, which makes Johann Ludwig Burckhardt's 1812 rediscovery less a discovery than a formal reintroduction to the outside world. Disguising himself as an Arab pilgrim and convincing a local guide to lead him to a supposed sacrificial site, Burckhardt walked through the narrow sandstone canyon called the Sick, and found a metropolis carved directly from rose-red rock on a scale that stopped him where he stood. Petra served as the capital of the Nabatean kingdom from around the 4th century BC, controlling trade routes connecting Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean, and at its peak held an estimated population of 20,000 people. Rome absorbed the kingdom in 106 AD. An earthquake in 363 AD damaged the water system severely, and the population drained away over the following centuries, leaving architecture that survived nearly intact inside a mountain range that kept everyone else out. Vesuvius buried Pompeii under 4 to 6 meters of volcanic ash and pumice in 79 AD, killing an estimated 2,000 people and sealing the city so completely that it dropped from public memory within a few generations. Sporadic medieval finds went unremarked until 1748, when a systematic excavation ordered by the King of Naples began pulling the city back into view. What the ash had preserved was without precedent in archaeology: bakeries with loaves still in the ovens, election graffiti endorsing candidates for positions that no longer existed, and bodies captured mid-flight whose voids in the hardened ash excavators filled with plaster to reconstruct the exact posture of death. Pompeii now covers 44 hectares, and approximately a third of it remains unexcavated. Between the 9th and the 15th centuries, Angkor supported a population estimated at up to 1 million people, making it the largest pre-industrial city on Earth and larger than any European city of the same period. A Thai invasion in 1431 shifted the administrative capital south. The jungle absorbed what remained, and French naturalist Henri Mouhot encountered Angkor Wat in 1860 and published accounts that reached European audiences, though local communities and Buddhist monks had maintained the temple continuously throughout. None of that prepared anyone for what LiDAR surveys, beginning in 2012, revealed. They showed a network of urban infrastructure covering over 1,000 square kilometers, with hydraulic systems, roadways, and satellite cities extending far beyond the temple complex that 19th century explorers had assumed represented the whole site. If this is the kind of history you want more of, subscribing helps us keep going. One night in the winter of 373 BC, the Greek city of Helike on the southern coast of the Gulf of Corinth ceased to exist. It was submerged by an earthquake and a tsunami, and by morning nothing was visible above the water. Later writers, including Strabo, described a bronze statue of Poseidon still standing upright on the seafloor. Archaeologists spent decades searching the Gulf without finding it, and that changed in 2001 when a Greek-American team discovered Helike buried not under the sea but beneath a coastal lagoon and river delta. It had been covered by 2,300 years of accumulated sediment, located 3 kilometers from where everyone had been looking. Streets, pottery, and building foundations from the exact period the ancient accounts described all survived beneath the silt. Marco Polo described Xanadu as a city of marble palaces, artificial rivers, and a vast hunting ground enclosed within a wall 16 miles in circumference. After the Ming dynasty expelled the Mongols and dismantled their capitals in the 14th century, the location faded from accessible knowledge for centuries. Archaeologists working in Inner Mongolia confirmed the site at Dolon Nor, with excavations revealing a walled complex whose imperial palace foundations matched Polo's dimensions closely enough to settle the identification without dispute. UNESCO granted the site World Heritage status in 2012. Write in the comments which of these you knew about before this video. The results are always surprising. At the foot of Mount Hermon in the Golan Heights, the ancient city of Banias concealed a temple complex beneath centuries of rubble and vegetation. Excavations in the 1990s began revealing its full scale. Herod the Great constructed a temple to Augustus there. His son Philip expanded it into a substantial city. The site held religious significance across Greek, Roman, and later periods, before disappearing entirely under collapsed debris for over 1,000 years. What the excavations returned to view included a palace complex, a colonnaded street, and a series of shrines carved into the cliff face above a spring that ancient writers had treated as sacred ground. Sitting on the border between Turkey and Armenia, Ani held 100,000 inhabitants at its peak in the 11th century, serving as the capital of the Bagratid Armenian kingdom and a major stop on the Silk Road trade routes. The Mongol invasion in 1236, followed by earthquakes and the rerouting of trade, drained the population so completely that the city stood abandoned by the 18th century. In the 19th century, Russian archaeologists excavating the site uncovered a walled city with cathedral architecture, palaces, and a sophisticated water supply system, all preserved under centuries of soil, untouched since the last inhabitants walked away. Explorers and local communities in Honduras had described a lost city in the Mosquitia rainforest for generations. Then, a 2015 LiDAR survey confirmed those accounts were accurate, revealing plazas, earthworks, and mounds arranged in a clear urban pattern across a hidden valley. The ground team that followed found stone sculptures, ceremonial objects, and vessels still resting on the surface, exactly where they had been left at the moment of abandonment. The civilization behind the site remains unidentified, and its architecture differs enough from Maya construction to indicate a separate, undocumented cultural tradition. Every member of the ground team contracted leishmaniasis from sandflies in the surrounding jungle before making it back out. Off the southern coast of Greece, in shallow water between the Peloponnese and the island of Elafonisos, a Bronze Age city sits 3 to 4 meters below the surface and has been visible to local fishermen for as long as anyone can remember. Marine archaeologist Nicholas Fleming formally identified the site in 1967, and 3-dimensional mapping surveys in 2009 revealed streets, buildings, courtyards, and at least 15 separate structures covering 30,000 square meters, with pottery dating occupation to at least 3,500 BC, 2,000 years before Homer. Pavlopetri submerged gradually as the coastline shifted over millennia, sitting in water shallow enough to snorkel through, spending 35 centuries being quietly fished over by people with no idea what lay beneath their boats. 10 cities that history mislaid, and the ground eventually returned. Troy survived 2,000 years of skepticism before 9 layers of occupation confirmed it. Petra waited inside its mountain for a Swiss explorer in disguise. Pompeii preserved a Roman mourning in volcanic ash for 17 centuries. Angkor concealed a million-person metropolis that only a laser grid could finally read. Helike spent 2,300 years under a river delta 3 kilometers from where everyone searched. Xanadu matched Marco Polo's measurements when the foundations were cleared. Ani held 100,000 people and emptied so completely the wider world forgot it existed. Ciudad, Blanca left its artifacts exactly where its last inhabitants placed them. Banias buried its temples under 1,000 years of collapsed debris. And Pavlopetri sat in 4 meters of clear Greek water for 35 centuries before anyone recorded what it was. The cities that disappeared did not go quietly. Walls, foundations, sediment layers, and the accounts of everyone who visited before the jungle or the water or the ash arrived, all of it waited. What changes is not the evidence. What changes is the willingness to look at the ground directly, instead of assuming the maps are already complete.